Partners. I'm your host David, and I'm very excited to bring along Stan Friedlander. How you doing, Stan?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So, you partner with Better Refunds, and basically, one of the things that I really liked about you is that you have one of the best resumes I've ever seen in my entire life, like probably ever. Can you just give like a rundown of your history?
Sure, sure. Well, I've spent a decent amount of time, over a decade each, at both offline and online retail. So actually, I spent about 14 years at Macy's in a very traditional brick and mortar buying path as an assistant buyer, divisional of a number of categories over a decent amount of time. And then, due to various consolidations that Macy's went through, I had a great career chance to start at Amazon, leading the apparel business from 2008 to 2012. Then ran the footwear business, the full P&L, first party, third party, you name it. I guess I ran it. and um, then actually spent a couple of years as an expat with Amazon and moved to Japan and ran the apparel, jewelry, and watch business for Amazon.jp out of Tokyo. I don't speak Japanese. Half my team couldn't speak with me. Amazon, in its own frugal ways, didn't hire translators. So it was a pretty fascinating experience. And when I moved back to the States, after my expat assignment, I left Amazon after, I guess, about 10 and a half years. And I fell into consulting. I don't. It's hard to even say I'm a consultant because I don't even. I don't have a website. I don't hang a sign on the door or anything. So I sort of count on, I guess, good business from referrals. But whatever works, I guess, is a better way of saying it. And as a consultant, I am not like a typical agency where I'm doing new item setup and whatnot. I do know how to do it. I'd be very slow. And I would tell people absolutely do not hire me for that purpose. I'm basically, I would say, hire me for one of two things. Top line advice, so 50,000 foot level executive strategy is about half of what I do, and then the other half I would say is uh, I'm like the cleaner, meaning you have a big hairy problem, typically with Amazon, and you filed a POA, you filed various cases, you get nowhere, and sometimes people find me, and maybe I'm able to solve something for you. And no, it's not because I send a note to Bezos.
So before we dive into what you currently do now, like I just have to ask because I mean I've shopped at Macy's and I've shopped at Amazon. What was it like shifting focus from Macy's to Amazon because they're totally different types of businesses and business models.
Um, yeah, I would say I was fortunate to start at Amazon at a time. And by the way, Amazon hates hiring brick and mortar people, so that's a different thing altogether. And they hated
So
it
lucky
even
you.
more so when I started there. So the fact that I even got the job is kind of a strange one in the first place. But I started at the right time. 2008, the Great Recession. Amazon had a virtually non-existent apparel business at the time, and realistically, uh, sort of just doing things that made sense to me, even if I didn't always have numbers to back it up, which is sort of against everything that Amazon stands for. Is you should have numbers to back it up, but if it's never been done before, you're sort of making things up. So I'm good at making numbers up and then just being right. Internally, they would say being right a lot. And I was fortunate to be given the chance, have bosses that would give me the chance to be wrong, and to be right, and that worked. At the time, um, many brands who otherwise might not have wanted to sell Amazon, if they're going through recessionary times and their own orders are getting cut, um, Amazon is a sort of an interesting outlet. even though today maybe a brand that's well known could go onto Amazon and instantly do millions of dollars, that was not the case in 2008. So it's not like when I say that it was easy. No, it was easy maybe to talk easier to maybe talk people into doing business with Amazon. Um, but still at the same time saying, no, you're not going to do a lot of business for a while. We have to do some more things right internally before the apparel business is going to be large enough where it makes sense or even means anything to you. And that did take some time.
So how did you get, you went from Macy's. Macy's was well known, way back then, right? But like Amazon, wasn't so like they were like I knew of it, like I knew of Amazon, like I graduated high school in 2008. So like I knew of Amazon, but like I didn't really use Amazon right in 2008. And like, moving from Macy's, which is a very well-known, franchise, to Amazon, and running their apparel, like, in a recession. What was that? What was the mindset of Amazon to decide to try and tackle and beat, I guess, Macy's even?
Well, to be
And what was it like
clear,
for you as a worker,
I
right?
needed a job. So, and I lived it, and I am the person that's actually from Seattle. So, go
Oh
Huskies,
wow.
or I should say, go Dogs. So I am that person that actually grew up there in about a 3 or 3.5 mile radius of the University of Washington. And aside from my trip to Japan, I'm actually that person. So to be clear, I needed a job. But no, I did actually interview at other places as well, and that would be much more traditional from an offline standpoint. Well, I'll give you one of the first things I worked on, and that was sort of trying to clean up the site. The way the site looked, if you're selling thousands, millions of SKUs, which in apparel they change over all the time because you're constantly having new product. And at the time, we allowed vendor imagery to populate. You can imagine that the site looked like a flea market. And I know people
Yeah.
might say that's how it looks today, but truly go back in time and look at how the site looked in 2008. And if you search for certain things like little black dress socks, the things that would come up at the time were not what you would say. They would not have been what the average consumer was intending. So the first things to work on would be to work on intentional search, proving to the search team of what was intended. What would you have intended? So it's actually trying to have everybody internally think like a consumer. So that's one. And then build it. So getting people to believe what you're saying and then getting it actually built could still take time. And then the other is that if you're allowing all vendor imagery to populate, you will never have a consistent aesthetic to the site. So actually having imaging rules, guidelines, and issuing them in a legal way, and then actually having some sort of imaging studio that could suddenly build out for every single ASIN that you're going to shoot physically. The cost of that was sort of daunting to folks when you first say, okay, we're going to shoot everything on model and whatnot. I didn't write a 6-pager, but I did write, I think, like a 2-pager, proving out why we had to shoot on model and why we had to not allow vendor imagery going forward, and what the cost of this would be and why it would pay for itself from a conversion improvement standpoint. And every single number in that 2-pager was made up. And that was written, I think, about a month after I started. And it would be the type of thing you just have to be right.
Right. So when you started, right, like you were there for, I mean, you were at Amazon for a very long time. So when you started, Amazon wasn't necessarily in the apparel world, and now it's pretty, if I'm not mistaken, it's number one in apparel. So like, we like, how fundamental was your job to getting, from literally nothing to pretty much number one in
In
the world?
2008, when I started, the 1P business was 22 million until we launched Levi's, which was another million. I can say these
Wow.
numbers now because they're so off of what the reality. Levi's is in the hundreds of millions now. So yeah, we basically did 23 million 1p my first year, and it was about getting brands and talking folks into selling to us, and then building a store that those same brands would be proud to be in. So actually, we built a denim store is one of the first things that we did, and so talking folks like Diesel or Seven for All Mankind and other higher ended premium denim brands to sell to us. Again, they needed sales because their sales were suffering at the same time. So, like I said, timing sometimes is helpful. About 2 months into the job in 2008, I was given a project of how do we become number one in 10 years, which I thought was insane at the time. But to your point, that's exactly what it was. I'm sure it's on a
Right.
spreadsheet or on a drive I have somewhere. And I'm sure Amazon folks would say that's not allowed to be shared out. I'd say, really? So a 2008 document, how close is that to reality? Well, as it turns out, yeah, that's about when Amazon passed Macy's, was around 2018, according to most research folks. I thought, again, at the time, so you're basically saying if we doubled every year for the next 10 years, we might surpass. We were, I think, according to Nielsen or Forrester or NPD, one of those back when I started, we were like 78th at the time. We had
Wow.
23 million in 1P, and then probably about 250 million in 3P at that time. So anyway, that's how Amazon thinks is, how do you build to be number one? And they don't mean online. They mean online and offline. And I remember some of the things that I wrote in that document were that we needed to offer free returns. That was a very hotly debated topic back in 2008, meaning no one wanted to do it. And then again, proving out the conversion differences that would take place if you did offer free returns, and what sort of break even that would be. That we would have to launch certain brands and what those brands would need in order, and quite frankly, some of that never took place. Nike and Polo still to this day don't sell direct to Amazon, and yet they were part of that document. Maybe they didn't know
Wow.
that. I don't know. So it doesn't, just
Redacted.
because you put it in a document doesn't necessarily mean that it took place.
So okay, so then you went to Japan. I'm sure we could talk all about this, about Japan. But what I want to know is what made you switch from working at Amazon to becoming a consultant.
Um, so yeah, so I worked at Amazon for 10 and a half years. I worked at Macy's for 14. For the most part, had only worked in fashion other than being a stockbroker for a nanosecond after grad school. Um, and when I moved back to Seattle, and left Amazon, quite frankly, I wouldn't say I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I did not want to work. I could see that Amazon was becoming much more bureaucratic, and as I sometimes will tell people, it's become the Microsoft of the '90s. That's a bit extreme,
Oh wow.
but that is somewhat of what I believe. And that could be a hotly debated topic if Jassy ever wanted to call me, which I know won't happen. But anyways, that I reached out to maybe 5 or 6 people in my network, footwear, apparel folks, of just saying, hey, I left Amazon. If you guys think of something, and then sometimes people ask, well, what do you want to do? And I'd say, I have no idea. And I'm not certain I want to do much of anything, quite frankly, after you work 80 hours a week for 10 years.
Right.
And a couple of them did say, well, if you're not doing anything, do you want to help us? And that turned into sort of the executive strategy that I was mentioning, of just coming in, and I'm not afraid to tell people what I think and what I think you're doing right, what I think you're doing wrong. In many cases, it may seem obvious to those that are in the business in dealing with Amazon all the time. You'd be surprised at the lack of sophistication on the brand side and the wholesale side. I happen to be a ridiculous believer of, that the product detail page is everything. It's the best sales associate you'll ever have. I think those that are involved with Amazon on a daily basis in the agency world would say that's, project done. I don't disagree, but you'd be surprised at how many wholesalers, especially in certain categories that make a lot of money, like apparel, where they're very hell bent on how pretty does it look in, say, a Macy's store, a Nordstrom store. And I'd say, you might want to focus on how does your product detail page look on Nordstrom.com or on Macy's.com and obviously on Amazon.com. Some of these people may say, well, we don't sell Amazon. And that just makes me laugh. Why don't you sell to Amazon? Well, because they have this marketplace and it drives us nuts. And I'm like, so you're on Amazon and you're not controlling it at all. Do you realize how dumb that sounds to someone that what you just said to me is, you're kind of, you think you're refuting what I just said, but if anything, you just, you made it that much more important. I'm not saying you should sell direct, but the fact that you just basically said you have no way of monitoring or doing anything to the detail page that exists on Amazon, you actually just reinforced exactly what I just said. And so sometimes, then that same person, they'll probably get annoyed and then not talk to me for a while. But the reality is that they end up coming back and say, well, what would you do? And so you just start there. I mean, to me, the detail page is everything. And literally talking to someone, okay, let's say you are in Dubuque, Iowa, and I'm sorry, I always pick on Dubuque, even though I've never been there. It's another way of saying Main Street, USA, of how is that person going to find your product? What are they going to type in? How are they searching there? And, you suddenly see a CEO or head of marketing or whatever. Well, aren't there certain search terms? I'm like, well, yes. And there are companies that actually can scrape and get amazing data off of Amazon and give it to you for not that expensive and tell you what are the terms that matter. In fact, if I look at your detail page and you're using color naming, and this is very common again in apparel, where instead of a blue shirt or a black t-shirt that you're wearing, you might use, I don't know, steel as the color name for this, or midnight for the color name for your shirt. And anyone who's dealt with me for a while knows that I'll use the midnight versus black example. And you just see light switches going off in people's heads of you let your designer write your copy. The designer does not know how to speak to someone in Dubuque, Iowa. And
Yeah.
they should never write any copy that is customer facing online. If you want them to write copy for Vogue magazine, that's great. If the same sort of example, if you make a computer and you want to go into GeekWire and that person who designed that computer interface, sure, let that person talk there. But again, that person should not be talking to the person that's in Dubuque, Iowa, or Seattle for that matter. And getting people to understand, okay, so how do I talk like a customer? That's, to me, what matters. It's I fell into apparel a bajillion years ago after I was a stockbroker. And even though I have zero fashion background, thought I would never go into fashion, thinking like a customer and merchandising like a customer. And when I say like a customer, I don't mean like an expert customer. I mean like every customer. If you want to open a boutique store in Beverly Hills, fine. That person, you better be able to speak to the expert. But if you're going to speak to 98% of the customers in the United States, you need to speak to everybody. And you need to start from that standpoint. The more that brands think like that, the better they help themselves.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting what you're saying because I actually wrote a post recently about, one of the things that my wife and I do whenever we're shopping, it's like even if we're at like a regular store, is the very first thing that we do is we look up the item, or like the brand itself. Is it a good brand? Did it get good reviews? Is the product details, like, does it make sense? The majority of time we're actually on Amazon. like because Amazon just has such a presence, and like if something doesn't add up, we don't buy it, and that's a loss on the brand itself. So like for with what you do, how do you help a company with their, let's say, product details page or their reviews, or do you not help them with that?
Oh, I might. It depends on where they are. To your point, and again, not to go only to apparel because I actually these days I'd say I mean, I'm pretty product agnostic as far as clients are concerned. So it's not specific to just apparel, but any new product obviously doesn't have reviews. And I've said this data point to folks that at Amazon, we could prove out that 0 reviews was worth less than 1 bad review. Meaning, if you had 1 bad review, that would convert better than an item that had no reviews. So and
Interesting.
that person, that 1 bad review may leave something that's a very robust, could be a Vine review, although that'd be pretty interesting. I haven't seen too many 1-star Vine reviews, but it can happen. I mean, Amazon truly does not uh, what should I say, they don't influence whatever the Vine reviewer writes. That's what the review becomes. Granted, you got a free product, so there is that. um,
Right.
But so 1 bad review, no matter how robust, it says this thing sucks and here's why it sucks, it will still convert better than no review. And you just spoke to it. You got some sort of trust level. In fact, the worse the review, the more robust the review, even if it's negative, you may help someone on, oh, well, I just won't use it in that way. I actually don't even need it for that, whatever the item might be. Um, and, and let's say if it was an apparel item, um, maybe the detail page was fixed per what this reviewer left. Say the item fit a half size small, and they adjusted the detail page to say this item fits in a certain way, and so future customers then think that this review, one, it helped them, and two, it helped them from a standpoint of, okay, I'll buy something a bit smaller, or bigger, and that's I have clients look at reviews from a standpoint of, do you even read your 1-star reviews, and do you have a process around it? How often do you read them? I'm not saying you necessarily, if you have thousands of reviews on an item, that you should always read them, or read every single one of them. But you should read the 1 and 2-star reviews. You should have a sense of, okay, if you have 4.4 as an average review rating and you have 10,000 reviews, do you know if it's been 4.2 on the last 1,000? And do you know why it came down? That's not the easiest thing to monitor, but it's just a way of throwing out to folks of, just because you have a good review right now, is it staying consistent? And do you know? And if you don't know, you kind of just answered some of the question, because you should know. So, those are the types of things that I might say to folks. And then when they say, so how would you do that? Quite frankly, that's not for me to do.
Oh,
Again, I might tell people, I'm too expensive, or quite frankly, that sounds mind numbing. Go hire an intern to do something like that. But it's valuable information. It's amazing what you can get from hiring an intern. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily want me collecting the data. It's kind of like, again, I can enter an ad campaign, a paid search campaign for you. It'll take me far longer than it would an agency, and I probably would cost about the same. So don't have me do it. Have me interview
so
them as to why
right.
they're good or bad for you.
So what type of executive stuff do you actually do for companies then? Like, it sounds like that, you're able to look on, from like an outsider's perspective, someone who actually has a lot of experience, you know, just being with Amazon, right? And so like what types of executive, I guess strategies are you able to really work with, the customers? And yeah, we'll start with there and then I'll ask my next question.
Yeah, I mean, I likely am going to want to better understand how do you get product to, what is your online strategy? Typically, if I'm dealing with an executive strategy, 50,000 foot level, something's wrong. I mean, you engage with me for some reason. And so usually you've given me that reason, and either it's there's too many people price matching us, or our business used to be growing by X and now it's flat. That has been a common one, say on the 1P side of things. I would say distribution and pricing ends up being a pretty big reason as to why people first reach out to me if it's the executive strategy side. And then usually what I'm looking at is how are they organized? I don't happen to believe that there's much difference from how brand X, brand Y, brand Z within a portfolio of brands, how you get to site should be managed. And you'd be surprised at how many parent companies manage themselves in a way where it's separate by brand. And each brand has its own distribution strategy. Each brand has its own map policy or no map policy. And while I understand that, what I don't understand is the detail page itself, the information and how it gets there, and the strategy and philosophy for what goes on a detail page does not change and is very agnostic to whether you are a designer brand, a Walmart brand, no offense to Walmart. And so getting folks to think more in terms of how you centralize your online strategy, that's not always a pleasant one to many, larger companies, even though they know it. They know that there's something wrong, because they're probably paying what feels like a fortune either to agencies or to having separate folks by brand, or you have a centralized sort of few people that are doing the new item setup and whatnot, but then they have to deal with a bunch of different brand presidents that have different strategies, and it just it just gets effed up, for lack of a better phrasing. That's typically what I end up working on, and then just providing some advice of how you get from point A to point B, um, to build out something that would work, in my opinion, better, and how Amazon would want to deal with it, how most online companies would want to deal with things, is they want to speak to sort of a single source of truth, for one, and two is they want to speak to people that are actually the doers, the people that are actually entering this information, and dealing with this stuff on a daily basis. Um, that's about half my time. The other half, like I had mentioned, is you got, and it's interesting how some of this is more the executive strategy. A lot of times is with 1P, and the problems tend to be with 3P. It's not completely like that, but I would say it is interesting on how it gets that's more the case. So people find me because they have an ASIN suspension, an account suspension, a product compliance issue, and they file tickets and they get nowhere, or they get a response and it's not exactly helpful. So they find me.
So, which of the two do you prefer working on? You got
I,
executive
I,
level stuff and you got suspensions.
yeah. Um, I mean, I'm not going to deny I prefer working on the strategy, more than solving things. That being said, most of the solving things, even though I can't guarantee anything, and I won't guarantee anything, is probably more immediately rewarding because if I, assuming I'm able to find the right person to talk to, which usually I can get some sort of contact information, and write it in a way that's more Amazonian or whatnot. Usually I can get some sort of success or at least a why answer, and that's helpful. That usually clients in that instance are appreciative more quickly. On the executive strategy side, it can be a bit more delayed, and getting to a certain sort of I don't know if it's a thesis statement or we're handshake at the end, that can take longer. So there's some different reasons as to why you might like one versus the other. I mean, strategizing as a general rule. I mean, if you're a leader, that's going to feel more rewarding over time.
Right. So, who are your ideal customers? Like, who do you hope
Hmm.
comes to you? You know.
Hmm. Um, I have clients that are either wholesalers or resellers. I definitely prefer, I mean, I certainly prefer people that are candid and share everything. I obviously, we all, can sometimes deal with folks that they want you to solve something and they think by telling you the information. I don't want them to think about um, what they think I might need, or even worse, because they genuinely have done something wrong. And I make it very clear that if I would have kicked you off, then I'm not going to help you. Um, I don't just take money to take money. I mean, that isn't how I operate. So if you find me, I say that to you, and you were doing reviews abuse or seller abuse of some kind, and that's why you got kicked off, and you think that I can help you, and so you give me certain information, but not all information, then yeah, that's a problem. I certainly don't enjoy that, but I'll be very quick to say I would have kicked you off. So I don't think I'd be the best salesperson on your behalf.
Have you ever gotten an offer from, a company like you just such like an amazing job? They're like, we gotta hire you. Like we want you full time. Have you ever gotten an offer like that?
Yeah, usually, I mean, sorry, I'm just going to say is usually they can't afford me. This is Amazon's way, I guess. I mean, yeah, I mean, quite frankly, if you're a mid-sized company and I come in, let's say, and offering me the head of ecom, a lot of times, yeah, that may be the right fit, but likely you can't afford me. And I'm not looking to do something along the lines of 80 hours a week and whatnot, which
Right.
is what I would do as soon as I start working full time. It's just who I am.
Right. I mean, this is just gonna be off course, but like, have you ever thought about like doing like mentoring services? Because like you have all these. I'm not necessarily talking about being like that mentor who like who helps companies like go out. I'm talking about you got all these people who are self-proclaimed Amazon gurus, right? Who know everything about Amazon and how to get into this, that, whatever. And like, if I'm gonna be honest, for the most part, I'm not. I personally don't know, but I've heard complaints from here and there about different people. But like, would you ever consider, doing like mentorship for those Amazon gurus who probably need
Yeah,
the
it's
mentorship?
funny you say that because I remember when I was leaving Amazon and I was talking about with my wife, I said I was thinking, um, there's lawyers that are do pro bono work, and would I actually go onto LinkedIn and post that if I take your case it's pro bono or something to that effect, and how would I prove out the difference between one reseller and this other reseller, meaning you're not very large, you're barely scraping by, and I recognize if I charge an hourly fee, it becomes a chicken and egg thing where you can't afford it. And no, I've thought of that, and I always came down to is that it would really annoy me if I ended up doing pro bono work for somebody that I later found out could easily have afforded it. I shouldn't say easily, but just, it should have been part of their business model where they just paid me. And that would annoy me. Not because I needed the money or whatnot. It's just more a matter of that somebody, and then we would talk about it as like, well, but then that's the same sort of thing of Amazon empowering its CS associates to give product away to solve a problem, not have to go to their boss. And I believe in that. And I strongly believe in empowering CS associates to be able to do the right thing. Yet at the same time, the seller associates that say you contact when you do a contact us or a case, they don't have that same mentality. In fact, if anything, they are incentivized to say no because that turns around the ticket much faster. So,
Hmm.
anyway, yes, I thought about it. I obviously haven't done anything about it because I'm not free. And, but do I I have referral arrangements with some folks where it's not money based. Folks that end up referring me, and it's pretty obvious they can refer me clients. Um, do I advise them in such a way, or do I refer them in such a way that it becomes this sort of a good symbiotic relationship? Yes, that happens actually more often than not.
That's really good to know. Something that you were just mentioning now about, CS, like it's actually really funny. My wife used to work at this company and she used to be in CS. And like one of her first assignments was literally to watch any and all videos with regards to Amazon CS department because they were like super top awesome, right? But the sellers don't feel the same way, right? Now that you've worked for Amazon and now you're working not necessarily against Amazon, but I would say parallel to Amazon. Like do you see Amazon differently now that you're consulting for the other side?
Oh
Do you
yeah.
do you feel that the sellers are
Um,
right?
uh, yes, and I admit that was a sort of aha moment of speaking at a seller velocity um, conference in Seattle in 2019, and then speaking to some of the sellers that were at the conference or who called in later or were referred. It became abundantly clear that abuse and solving abuse was there. I mean, it's still hard for me to even say there is no good process right now, and I'd say this to this day, that hiring, unfortunately, folks like me. I mean, if Amazon really truly had great processes around these things, I shouldn't need to exist. That I just shouldn't, and neither
Right.
should many agencies who all they, for the most part, do are POAs and escalations and whatnot. They shouldn't need to exist, but they do. And I don't know of a single other. I mean, is there a Walmart cottage industry of consultants? I don't think so.
I don't know.
Is there a
I know there's
Walmart
a
cottage
Walmart.
industry of psychologists that help, the brands that sell to Walmart? I don't think so. Um, and I'm not trying to make Walmart sound, I mean, they are difficult, but approximately the money you're going to make. And, I would argue that can and does exist on Amazon, certainly. But then when something goes wrong, the difference of how Amazon deals with you as a seller, it was eye opening. When I stopped working there, I was a bit shocked as to how difficult a time many sellers go through. And again, it's not if everything's working and you have no problems. It's when a problem comes up, and it's somewhat easy for someone to do something to you to create a problem that didn't exist. Say you just sell your own products on Amazon. You don't even sell them to anybody else, and someone files a complaint that they are the brand owner and not you. That can suddenly be months of
Yeah.
you dealing with an associate in, Chennai or Costa Rica, where they are incentivized to deny your claim, even though you can show proof that you are the brand owner and that no one else, I mean, you're the only one that even makes this damn product, whatever it happens to be. Um, and it could all just be someone just file another seller, competitor, and then Amazon doing, even when you show proof and even when they end up agreeing with you because you use someone like me or some other agency and you get reinstated and all of this and it goes away and your perception is that it goes away. But in theory, Amazon should also have seen along the way that this other person did this to you. That other person usually still exists on Amazon
Wow.
and they know it. And yet, why? And I've pointed out these things, a lot of these things. And I know the person that runs this area, and yet it still exists.
Wow.
So, you know, it's those things that actually are a bit surprising. Um, and how many folks who won't go on record, and I respect this, but that would say they're afraid of Amazon, and that's kind of interesting too. It's almost like Amazon's the mob of online, which I would
Wow.
never have thought of it that way when I worked there. I'm not saying I was, was I always easiest to deal with. I would hope I was at least, you knew what I was saying and why I believed or was doing whatever strategy, even if you didn't, it wasn't helpful for you. Um, but I would say that the vast majority of sellers don't always understand. Um, you know, and
Wow.
that
Okay.
actually that would
So
be something I have no problem telling people if I look at a case and saying, "Oh, this is what's happening to you." I mean, just because I can usually say that to folks without you don't have to hire me to get to that answer. And then when people say, "Can I help with it?" I usually, yes or no, whether I can or can't. Um, but I can usually tell you why Amazon is doing whatever it's doing.
so if you can give I wish I could talk to you for the next like 6 hours, but unfortunately I can't. So if I can ask you one tip that you would give Amazon sellers, that could help them, with literally anything, with regards to their business, right? What or even 1P, it doesn't have to be FBA, it could be even vendors, right? Like what would that be? What tip would you give?
Again, I mean, it's probably just what I said maybe earlier is focus on the detail page. Use the detail page as your like you said when you go into a store and you look up items. 60% or more of product search starts on Amazon. I believe the data point is it's over half of people that are going through a physical brick and mortar still are on their phone looking up items. Maybe not every single item, but they are looking up something and they are looking up on Amazon. Is it sometimes that you're in a Best Buy and you're actually on the Best Buy site looking up that item on Best Buy? Possibly, but I would say you are because you're comparing it to Amazon. Even
Right.
if you have no intent of buying it from Amazon at the time, but actually Best Buy will price match if it's the exact same item. They'll price match in store immediately to what. So again, it's just focus on your detail page and like it may sound and some are. I mean, actually, I would argue sellers as a general rule are far more obsessed than brands. You would think the brands would be obsessed. Brands get obsessed about their stupid brand store and what that might look like, even though no one uses it. That's is focus on the detail page. This is where people go. How many clicks did it take to get there? What was your path to get there? What items did you, what search terms did you use? And then what did, if you learned something and there was some sort of ahas of how you got there, and even if you know the exact style naming convention and you type that into search and let's say it came up as the first item in organic, you should be paying attention to what came up in paid. Do you even know what I'm talking about when I say that? Like you should like learn what I mean by that. Why, when people say, why are all these products showing up on and what's sponsored, like I hate to say, you should know that. If you're selling something on Amazon, you should know all of those terms and you should know why they are surfacing there. You should know why somebody is surfacing next to you, even if your item was the first item in organic search. When aren't you the first item in organic? And does that make sense? I mean, if you're selling a running shoe and your name's not Nike, there's it's not worth it to you to pay to get to where that would be in the first row of search results. But what terms are out there where you could or should be? What's your differentiation? And are you paying for those terms? Those are the types of things that I would say I'm a little surprised that folks don't know those things. Um, and hence, that's why agencies exist. Amazon hates the agency world. And yet, again, if you would just help people, this billion, I don't even know, I think it's like $3 or $4 billion his consulting agency's just dealing with Amazon. I mean, talk about a six pager. Amazon, you could just do that by having account management that wasn't a bunch of new hires that turn over every 6 months. So anyway, that's my rant against. I don't know why um, why Amazon hasn't monetized this in some way.
Okay, I say the same thing about our company. Like I wish you didn't need to use us, but if you need your reimbursements because Amazon kind of messed up, that's why we're here. Amazon gives jobs to everyone without meaning to.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
All right, how can people reach you, Stan? What's the
Probably
best
the
way?
easiest way is via email. It's just friedlanderstan@gmail.com. So just my last name, first name, no dot, no period, no space. So friedlanderstan@gmail.com. I hate to say I'm very Amazonian in that I'm very responsive on email. I try to think, I think 2 days ago, I did answer my phone. My wife, I think, called me 3 times, and by the third time, I picked up, and she had butt dialed me out all 3 times. So I admit I'm not someone that picks up my phone unless you're already in there. So I hate to, it's not worth calling me, but I'll be very responsive on email.
Fantastic. All right, it was great having you, Stan. I look forward to hopefully having you again on another podcast. And you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks a lot, David.